Welcome to Ain't I a Woman, a conversation with Black women about race in America, our Juneteenth special edition of GOODSTOCK Consulting's Breaking Bread series. Juneteenth, short for June 19th, marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that enslaved people would be free. The troops' arrival came a full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth marks an effective end to slavery in the United States and is considered the longest running African-American holiday. In 1979, Texas became the first state to make Juneteenth an official holiday. Today, 47 states recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday, while efforts to make it a national holiday have so far been stalled in Congress. There's a lot more to learn about this important day in US history, so read up if there's more that you want to learn. I'm Kelly McKenzie, one of the three ladies of GOODSTOCK Consulting, and it is a pleasure to kick off the conversation tonight, and I know that we are about to have some good dialogue with our panelists.
So yeah, Kelly, so as you said, yes, there is a lot to learn. What we know for sure is that the first Africans that were forced to America was in 1619. That was 127 years after Christopher Columbus kind of stumbled his way onto American shores and said he found something, right? But then it was only 157 years later that we nationally kind of celebrate what we call Independence Day on July the 4th, 1776. Now, we know for sure that did not mean that everyone was free in America, because there were certainly still slaves. That was just us declaring our independence from Britain, right? But what happened was it had to take the Civil War that started in 1861 before Black people started this tug of war of whether or not we could be free or not. And it wasn't until, as we know, 1865 that we actually were declared free. However, the Emancipation Proclamation, most people don't realize, is that was actually January 1st, 1863. So 2.5 years prior to us being actually free in the end of the Civil War. Now, what other people don't know is that it was actually 2 months after the Civil War ended that the last slaves in Texas were actually told that they were free. And the reason being, y'all, is literally they wanted to first harvest their crops and then they were going to let us go forward. Now, that was in 1865. We know that we had to have the 13th Amendment, right? The 14th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, before we really start to see these civil rights and these acts of freedom actually bestowed upon Black people, and particularly upon women. Now, I mentioned the 19th Amendment, which we think of as the suffrage movement for women, but honestly, white feminists largely left Black women out of that conversation of whether or not we too should be considered equals, right? And so that's what brings us to this whole discussion today on this Juneteenth, is that we know Black women historically have been left out of the conversation on many of the movements, and we wanted to provide a platform to say, what is it to be not only Black, but a woman in America? Because like Malcolm X said, the most disrespected person in America is a Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is a Black woman. And the most neglected person in America is a Black woman. And the question is, does that still ring true? So the whole title of this talk today is Ain't I a Woman? Just giving homage to the great Sojourner Truth, who stated these words back in the 1850s, right? And the question is, are we still in that struggle of declaring ourselves as a woman and not having to be as what is typically thought of as being the strength of a Black woman?
Guys, that was a great history lesson. I think it's a conversation that most of our kids need to have more often. So I'm excited about this year's Juneteenth, because despite what 45 says, he did not discover this. We knew about this well in advance. So welcome to the party. Okay, come through head wrap, come through sweetgrass earrings. We are representing for the culture today. Right. And so we knew that on this special day, we had to have a special conversation. And so we had to bring the most special people we could think of that could really speak to what it means to be a Black woman here in America. So in envisioning this panel, we had to identify a moderator who'd walked a longer journey than we have, someone who has also addressed the issues from a different perspective, so personally and professionally. So Juana was a no-brainer for us, based not only on her life experiences, but just on her chosen career path. She's a corporate DEI leader in a healthcare system. That's what we do. You know, we also knew that we needed to have the voice of our youth and young adults represented. Come through, Tyler. Especially in light of what's happening right now with the protests. They are really at the front lines. And so it's time for us to step back and listen to what they have to say, because I truly do believe that these young people who are smart, talented, and sharp, they will be the ones that will be our social justice warriors now and moving on into the future. And last but certainly not least, our new GOODSTOCK sister, Lauren, our Dr. Powell. She's joining us today because she's just a badass lady boss and she matches our fly. And we know just through professional work and engagements that she can handle this panel. And so before we turn over the reins to Juana to moderate the discussion, we're going to do a quick round of introductions and a lightning round of some fun questions, okay? So ladies, panel ladies, please share your name, where you live, and what you currently do professionally. I know I kind of let some of it slip.
I'm happy to, I can go first.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Okay. So hi, everyone, and happy Juneteenth to everyone. Excited to be here joining you. So thank you for the invitation. My name is Dr. Lauren Powell. I am currently in Richmond, Virginia. I actually grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, but I currently live here in Richmond, Virginia. And I am the founding executive director of Times Up Healthcare, which is an organization focused on eradicating gender bias for women working in healthcare. Glad to be joining you this evening.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Brockington. I'm a grad student. I live in New York City, and I also work at a local New York City-based nonprofit. I'm so excited to be here with everyone.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Thanks, Tyler. And you, Juana.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be with you tonight. I'm Juana Slade, Chief Diversity Officer of Diversity and Language Services at ANMed Health in the big metropolis of Anderson, South Carolina. I'll tell you more about my organization as the night progresses, but thanks for including me in this conversation. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now that you guys know the formals, we need to get into some informals, because if you know, and you've watched the previous Breaking Breads, you know that the ladies of GOODSTOCK, we appreciate a good sip and a good kiki, okay? So before we get started into the deep heart of what we want to talk about today as Black women, I need to know, which artists are y'all feeling right now? I mean, who's giving you joy through all of this chaos of COVID and protests and riots? Who are you living for? And let's keep it to a Black female artist.
It's the same one, my go-to. I listen to her music all the time, been listening to her for 25 years, Anita Baker. You bring me joy.
That's free, people.
Love it.
Yes. Yes. Come through, Anita. What about you, Lauren?
Oh my gosh, you actually took mine. I live for Anita Baker.
I love this.
Yes, I live for Anita Baker. So I went to, I got to go see her in concert last summer this time in Vegas, and it was epic. So yes.
Okay,
Anita.
you better redeem.
Best concert I have ever been to, Anita and Frankie in Carowinds. Oh my God.
Wow. Anita makes you want to slow drag with your man. Like, get close and just let him just drag you all over the place. Like, we don't slow dance. I want to slow drag with you.
Slow drag.
That's right. That's right.
I got two right now.
Yeah. Tyler, what about you? Who you vibing to right now?
So, all right, mine might be a little different, but I just read Sister Outsider for the first time by Audre Lorde, and that book just kind of changed my life. So that's on the literary side. But speaking of music, No Name, I've really, really been feeling her lately, just as an artist, a rapper, and a person. She's a great person to follow if you like Twitter. She started her own book club focused on Black issues and people of color, and they only do books written by women, people of color. So definitely check it out.
All right.
I love it, Tyler. I love it. Audre Lorde is one of my favorite civil rights activists, poets. Y'all know one of my favorite quotes is, there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. And I mean, what could be more apropos for Black women in this society today? I mean, that quote just rings so true to me. So I'm glad that her canon and her influence is continuing. I have another question for y'all ladies, and that is, what piece of advice did your mama or your grandmama give you that has just really stuck? And I'm going to start with you, Lauren.
The first thing that comes to mind is keep God first. And that came from my grandmother, that came from my grandmother's grandmother, from my mother. And so that has continued to reign true for me in my life.
Amen to that. What about you, Ty?
So my mom might kill me for saying this, but the piece of advice that I always come back to from her, she always tells me, feel what you feel and then move on. I was an emotional child. So, she says, allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling, cry, set a timer if you have to. But then, once your time is up, get back to work, which has really helped me a lot through these times and just in general in my life.
I really appreciate that. And for all the viewers out there, Tyler's mother is my work wife. I claim her, she is my wife, and she's incredible. And that's just, that advice is indicative of how amazing she is. All right, what about you, Juana? Words of wisdom from your mother or your grandmother?
Yes, ma'am. It is a scripture that is on my wall. She used it to inspire me, to punish me, to keep me in check. Galatians 6:7, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever man soweth, that so shall he also reap. I have been thinking about that during these times because ours is not to judge. We have no idea what is going to happen. But I think if you believe in a higher power, then you know that the divine will take care of that. That's not for me to be concerned about. I got to make sure that I'm sowing good seeds.
I'm gonna work on that.
Yeah. Galatians 6:7-8.
Yes, because they be working my nerve. Okay, that's good. How about, okay, so my question is, what 3 words would you use to describe yourself pre-COVID? And now has COVID now shifted the way you would, the way you view, the way you would use if someone said, who are you? What about you, Miss Tyler?
Okay, so pre-COVID, I was definitely very ambitious. I just moved to New York. I was also burnt out and plugged in. I'm always taking in news of the day via Twitter. And I would say now I feel hopeful. I feel rested and I feel re-energized.
Really? You said pre-COVID was burned out?
Yes. And you know what? I think, this is not to say that COVID-19 was a good thing to happen at all, but I think one thing that came out of it that was a positive for myself was being forced to slow down and take more time to myself and having to reassess where I was in my life, if that makes any sense, because you're forced to slow down. You can't leave your house. You can't, do X, Y, Z. So in a way, it kind of helped me find my center. I've been reading more and meditating more. So.
What are you, a Capricorn?
No, I'm an Aries.
Right. What about you, Lauren?
Oh gosh. So pre-COVID, I would say on the run, like nonstop, and commuting. Like I was commuting back and forth. I was just doing a lot. Doing the most would be a good phrase. I think now I would say entrepreneurial. I would say like focused in a way, and also like a little tired, like exhausted still. Yeah.
Very valid. Very valid. What about you, Juana?
There are just so many threes, not enough, but I was constantly moving. I was all over the place, always focused externally. And quite frankly, I did not monitor my spending. One of my passions, the things that the thing that I enjoy is going out and spending money and shopping and going by a store. But now I have had to focus my time, focus my attention, rekindle my marriage, because we're in here together, which has been a wonderful thing. Having deep conversations, having deep conversations in a way that we hadn't in a very long time. And I am calm.
Huh.
Yeah.
Cue the Anita Baker, honey.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
And Kim.
What about you, Kim?
I love it.
What 3 words would you feel are you pre-COVID and then post-COVID?
You said Kim?
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, I make this joke that pre-COVID, I would describe myself as advocate, leader, ambitious. Now, post-COVID, I've just labeled myself as domestic servant. I mean, just taking care of these kids, this dog, this husband, this house, these flowers, everything just needs attention. I'm so confused about how I'm supposed to keep all of them alive. So the plants might die.
Yeah. It's all good, girl.
Something's gotta go.
Something's gotta give.
Yes. Mama is tired.
Yeah. Fair.
What about
I'll go next. Pre-COVID, definitely. Well, y'all know I had entered a new season. So pre-COVID, I had left my job. I had entered into kind of a pseudo sabbatical and was just trying to figure out, well, what's my next step? So in this very interesting space. So pre-COVID would be exploring, optimistic, and very forward-looking, because everything just seemed like a possibility. Post-COVID, I'd say tooth grinder. Y'all had to get me one of them. What are those things called? Like a dental guard? Yes. Okay. Post-COVID, tooth grinder, homemaker / homeschooler extraordinaire. I'm gonna claim it. I mean, I have done more arts and crafts projects than I ever knew was even possible. So I'm gonna claim homeschooler. And then, you know what, Juana, I'm gonna take a page out of your book, just wifey. Me and my husband have had to get close in ways that we never had, because we've never been in each other's company this much. So definitely wifey.
And I don't know how, honestly, I don't know. I would think pre-COVID, I was comfortable. Yeah, I was refocusing on myself a lot, and getting into a rhythm of just being on the lower key side. And post-COVID, because of conversation we've had to have, it's forced me, because I'm very much an introvert, and it's forced me to be in situations now where I have to talk to people. Kim, let it go. I am an introvert. So it's forced me to be in situations where now I'm having to talk more to people. And actually, I'm very fortunate, and I'm grateful for it, but my phone does not stop. And I have now tried to figure out, how can I put this on do not disturb, but only let the important things come through, because I feel like people feel too
entitled,
accessible. Yes, I'm too accessible. And yeah, and I love to talk and to teach, but I also need to decompress, because I'm dealing with the pandemic stuff in the hospital and fear that brings, and then all this on top of it. And it's just like, I just need time to just be like in this space. So yeah. Can I just
sing your praises, and don't try to deflect the compliment or turn it back around on somebody, as you are prone to do. But Ebony, you have done an incredible job during this COVID season in really teaching and translating scientific data and information and informing the Black community about how to keep themselves safe, and have done it with just sass and confidence and
grace.
With grace and just a sense of urgency that I really deeply admire. So it just underscores to me 1,000-fold that I'm with the right business partners, and you just keep slaying it out there in them CNN and MSNBC streets.
And honestly, I know, but we all do that. And I think the reason why when I say we all, I think this whole panel is because women, we put ourselves in a position of saying, if our kids, when I mean kids, meaning the nation, if they're hurting, we run to the rescue. And so it's like, regardless if we're tired or not, regardless if we need that Anita Baker moment, it's like, I got work to do, and I can rest after it's done. And so I think that's where I am right now, of as emotionally draining as it can be, I can rest when it's finished.
Yeah, because you know,
amen
you've done
to
a
that.
job well done.
A job well done, and let the work that I've done speak for me. So with that, we're going to kick it over to Miss Juana, not Miss, let me drop that, Juana. Just Juana, please. We have passed the moderator mic to you and are excited to dive into this conversation. So lead us.
Well, I'm going to really press myself to stay on schedule. Not sure that I'm going to do the moderation very well, because I'm gonna want to answer my own questions. But my sisters, our vocabulary has really evolved over the last 3 months. Words and phrases that were unfamiliar, or worse yet, whispered, are now commonplace. Pandemic, systemic, epidemiology, disease modeling, disease trends, anti-racism, racist, constructs, racial allies, racial stereotypes, homegrown terrorism, homegrown terrorist, and the daily proclaimed unprecedented times that we're in. I think if I hear that word one more time, I will absolutely have a fit. But we truly are in unprecedented times. What if? What if there had been no Rashad? What if there had been no George? What if there had been no election of President Trump? What if there had been no election of President Barack Obama? What if there had been no LA race riot? What if there had been no Rodney King? What if there had been no march on Washington? What if Martin, Robert, and John had lived? What if there had been no march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge? What if there had been no bus boycott? What if Juneteenth had never been declared? What if the Emancipation Proclamation had never been written? What if that first ship from Dongo carrying 20 to 30 enslaved Africans had never landed in 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia? We'll never know, because all of those things have happened over the course of the last 400 years. It's now our responsibility, and in particular, your responsibility, to speak truth to power with dignity and with grace. So instead of tonight's question being about what if, the question is what now? This question is for everyone. Ebony and Kelly, let's hear from you in that order. What are your thoughts about where we currently find ourselves as a nation? Part one. Part two, how have you been feeling and coping since both racial tension and civic engagement and activism have continued to heighten? So Ebony, why don't you go first?
Ooh, so where do I find ourselves as a nation? Well, for one, I've always been a big history buff. So I find myself frustrated whenever I hear people say, oh, now there's an outrage and the joining of chants of Black Lives Matter, because to me, it's that same chant of Black Lives Matter was the same chants in my parents, and you, Ms. Juana, with the civil rights movement, it's the same chants that was used with Nat Turner and Denmark Vincent. That's the same chant, and it shouldn't take, like you said, for a George Floyd to die, and an Eric Garner and a Trayvon Martin and all the people that we know have come before. And so I'm frustrated because I want to make sure that this is not just another opportunity to clap until we get the civil rights bill of 1968, like we did with Martin Luther King when he was murdered. I don't want it to just be a jump board. Like, I want true systemic change across the board. So yeah, so that's what I feel frustrated, but
So,
hope.
yes, yes, hopeful. Kelly, what about you? Muted.
There we go.
Yes, ma'am.
I was saying that I'm feeling a range of emotions, much like, so many of my friends that I'm speaking to, my family that I'm speaking to. The reality is that my mother, when she was a student at Claflin College, was highly active in the civil rights movement. She was a teenager who, marched for civil rights, fought for civil rights, was incarcerated multiple times. And so it's hard to know that history and that past that so many people have walked before us fighting for the exact same things that I see young people in the streets fighting for today. So when I think about the history of my own family, the history of this country as it relates to civil rights and where we are now, it's both frustrating and dispiriting, because you have to question and wonder, when will some of these systemic changes take place? When can we stop marching? When will there be a degree of equality in these here United States of America? In terms of coping, to be honest, not well. I've been broke down. I have a 6-year-old son who has seen me cry more within the past 3 weeks than he's ever seen me cry.
Yeah.
I have a 6-year-old son who, the day after we learned about George Floyd, just happened to crawl into the bed with me with his baby book. And he opened it up, and it has a letter from Michelle and Barack Obama, forever president. And the next page are the picture of his hands and feet. And when I looked at that picture of these little hands and feet, I just started sobbing, because I'm like, good God, every mother has that picture somewhere. Every mama has those little footprints, those little hands. And I just wonder, like, why don't they see our humanity? Why can't you see our humanity? Because no matter what you look like, you have that image, whether it's your own, whether it's your niece or nephew, So it's just hard for me to even wrap my head around the fact that in 2020, people still don't see our humanity. And that's hard to accept.
Let's switch things up a bit. Lauren, when was the first time that you realized that you were Black? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, because I feel like I knew for a very long time. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, which, yes, there are Black people in Indiana. A lot, quite frankly, especially in the northern part of Indiana, like Gary. It's where the Jackson 5 are from. That's not where I'm from, but that's where the Jackson 5 are from. In Indianapolis, there was a small Black community, so like we all knew each other, and we grew up in community. And my mom, actually, when we were younger, used to make my sister and I were part of an oratorical troupe. So we were part of like an oratory team, which was like so lame now when I think about it. But it was super lame, but it was so grounding, because we used to learn the poetry from Black poets. We used to learn and memorize poetry from Gwendolyn Brooks, from Langston Hughes, from Maya Angelou, Paul Laurence Dunbar. We used to memorize the poems and perform them. And I mean, we were like 7 or 8 talking about phenomenal woman. That's me. We were like, what? Like 7, like, why are you, screaming phenomenal woman? But I knew at that age, I knew so young that I was Black, and we were proud of that. Intentionally, very, very proud of that. And my mom made sure at a very young age that we actually, had spent extra time learning about Black history. Spent extra time learning about our rich history, and all the things we never learned in school.
I think it's been very interesting over the last few days, in particular today. My email was absolutely blowing up with questions and comments from my white colleagues who wanted to reach out and who are really starting to engage and have insightful and meaningful comments. And I sent out an everybody email earlier, late yesterday. It went out actually at midnight, and it gave a couple of sentences and some information about Black history in general, and then in particular Juneteenth. And this one young man, he is a data analyst. He wrote 3 paragraphs to me telling me all about how he felt, and there were things he didn't know and he'd never heard about Juneteenth. And I simply emailed him back and I said, I was taught about 1776 and July 4th. You weren't taught that information. And so I think your mom invested, Lauren, in you. She helped you to understand what our role was from an educational perspective. She imparted that knowledge to you by making sure that those works of art were embedded into you, who you are, and they were about who you are. Kimberly, you want to unmute and tell me when or if maybe the first time you realized that you were Black?
Yeah, I think you guys know I'm from Hollywood. So it's a Black community, sounds much like Indianapolis. So we grew up in a Black community where everyone, you just kind of inherently knew. I think where the shift came for me was when I was probably about 5, and someone said that I was such a pretty dark-skinned girl. So I would say that it was probably more colorism in my community, because it was a predominantly Black community. So I didn't have to advocate for or defend my Blackness to white people. I had to defend my Blackness to Black people. And so, not having a native Charleston accent, or at least not, sober, having a Charleston accent, or even doing like things that were that may have been considered eclectic, and I like to read, and I was just kind of different. So I often had to prove my Blackness with Black people, not with white people. Fortunately for me, but I can see this shift in my kids.
But liking to read is Black though.
Liking to read is Black. So I'm not saying that it's not, saying that characteristically in my community, kids weren't saying, hey, let's meet at the library and stay for 5 hours. No, I was like, Mommy, can you drop me off to the library? It wasn't bigger than a closet. And she would forget me there. But I felt at home.
My mama too.
You could get home.
My mama left me at the library too. The library.
Your children.
They actually closed the library. And so they had to call security to come unlock it, because I had fallen asleep up in the stacks. Like, nobody knew this kid was sleeping in the library.
That wasn't an accident though, friends.
That wasn't an accident. She had 4 girls. She probably thought, I can get rid of one and be okay. I can get rid of one. But
you're taking us in a totally different direction.
Sorry, yes, completely different.
I want to go there. Ebony, let's start with you. I want to talk about code switching. You and I both work in a healthcare system. You are a physician, and I'm going to make assumptions about who your colleagues are and who they may not be.
I'm the only person.
Okay, so there you are. I don't have to be polite about it and PC about it and I can truly go there. At the first 4 senior levels of or 2 senior levels of my organization, there are 4 people of color, and 2 of us are women, 2 of us are men. So anyway, so let's talk about code switching. As context, the definition that I'm going to use for code switching is when someone changes their language based on who they are with, typically to fit in better with the dominant group, whatever that is. There are many reasons why people code switch. For example, 95% of the medical interpreters who are on my team, obviously they're Spanish speaking and they interact in their native language. When I walk into the room, by the way, I'm monolingual. So when I walk into the room, they instinctively switch to English because they want to make sure that I am included. So Ebony, can you speak to code switching? Do you recognize it? Have you recognized it? What does that feel like? How is that manifested in your interactions?
Right. very interestingly, so I don't code switch. I tell people this all the time. The way I talk here with Black people, if I have an all white panel, I'm going to talk to you the same as that way. I'm not going to try to dampen it or soften it or present, because literally my name means Black. So I feel completely confident in who I am, but I feel like the opposite is true. I get white people code switch with me. Like, it's like they use vernacular. I mean, they use these phrases we all know, like, hey sister, hey girlfriend, hey da-da-da, and it's like,
you go girl.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, just stop. But it is one of those things of, but I do recognize code switching. When I was very young, I think that's the reason why I don't do it, because I recognize that, like my mom, fantastic mother, but I would notice that when she was around white people, the way she spoke, the way we carry herself was different. And I talked about this on our podcast a couple different times, but when I was in the in the third grade, there's a guy who was my classmate. He told me I couldn't celebrate Black History Month because I wasn't Black, because I looked different. And I think that made me very hyper to the fact of being, I'm gonna be real, I'm gonna be all the way Black at all times, to let people know that for one, that I am, but I just felt, because I went to an all Black elementary school except for 2 white kids. And so that made me feel like an other. And I was like, no, but I am you. So I make it a very, very vigilant about not code switching. And when I'm training my medical students and my medical residents, I tell them too, you keep your voice, you speak exactly what is true. The audience, it doesn't matter who it is, because the truth is the truth on any day that ends with a Y. So speak it, and make sure that you're completely authentic. And then you don't have to worry about if all of a sudden those 2 rooms meet, they're not wondering, well, who is this person? You're gonna get this one.
Yeah. So Tyler, guess what? You're gonna get all 3 questions, and so you don't. You don't have to worry.
Boom.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about remembering them.
Okay.
There is value in hearing your voice because of all that we're seeing now. You and your colleagues, you and your friends, you and the people that you hang out with are the ones who are going to have to pick this up and take it somewhere. So let's go back to the first question. What are your thoughts about where we are as a country?
It's a big question, but above all, I'm hopeful. I think I'm not blindly optimistic, but I am hopeful. If that makes any sense. I think that we've seen what can happen when we all come together and when we really focus and put all of our energy towards an outcome. And I think that that's great, but I think, and I believe somebody said this earlier, I don't want to get complacent with that. There's still so much work that we have to do.
I don't mind telling my age, because I'm proud, because every year that you age is 1 year that you're not gone. So I'm good with letting anybody know that I'm proudly 61 years old. I am not too old to go out and protest, but I don't know if I am bold enough to do it day after day, week after week. So have you protested any?
So I actually haven't, and that's mostly for personal reasons. I have really bad anxiety when it comes to crowds. I think that we've seen, I don't know, a little bit of generational trauma when it comes to crowds in terms of like mass shootings and just general bad things happening. So whenever I'm in very large groups of people I don't know, I just start itching and I have to find the door. So protesting is not the method for me, but I'm really proud of everyone that I know and people that I don't know that I've seen protesting every day. And for me, my advocacy comes from speaking to everyone I know about the issues that I care about and donating money when I can and where I can.
Yeah. So when's the first time you realized that you were Black, or has that been an aha moment for you?
So I don't think of it as an aha moment, but for me, it was more of like a sharpening of my field of vision. Like, you know, others said in the beginning, I grew up in a household that celebrated Blackness for sure. You know, we watched Black movies, we listened to Black music. You know, we celebrated our culture for sure. But I will say an incident that I recently was reminded of is that when I was a military brat, so I started school when I was 3 in England. And when I came to America, I was about kindergarten age. But I had already been in school for a year. So my mom was trying to get me into the 1st grade because I could read and write at a 1st grade level already, if not a 2nd grade level. So coming from England to South Carolina, this little Black girl with a British accent, they were not going to put me in that 1st grade class. And I remember my mom, you know, yelling at everybody at the school, yelling at everybody on the phone. And you know, thanks to her parenting at that age, I never realized it was because I was Black and this is the South. But as I got older and the memory started to sharpen in my vision, and in the vision of my memory, I kind of realized that, like, oh, that's the only reason why, because they knew I could read, they knew I could write, and they knew that I'd already been in school for a year.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much my moment.
Yeah. Well, you've sort of answered the 4th question, but I do want to go back. Any thoughts or comments about code switching?
I code switch. I do. It's something that to me feels like a defense mechanism at times, because Black culture, but specifically the Black culture that I'm from, you know, my family's culture, we have our own little sayings and we have our own little way of doing things. And that sometimes feels very precious to me. And I don't always share that with people until I'm close to you to a certain extent. So I definitely find myself doing it a lot, but I have tried to become more mindful of it.
Yeah, I'm not going to say put off, because that might be a little strong, but I have white colleagues who will attempt to relate with terms that are probably not in their vernacular or part of their conversation on a regular basis. In my mind, I'm having this conversation that says, okay, the only reason you said, hey girl, hey, is because you heard somebody else say that.
Say that.
That is not
Say
how,
that.
that's probably not how you talk to the folks that you hang out with. You know, are you going to invite me to your house to spend personal time with you and we develop a relationship and start calling each other girl, hey? Then maybe so, but not somebody that I just pass in the hall who wants to connect. So
it's so offensive. I just don't understand why in 2020 people are still doing that. Like, hey girl, and like all that foolishness. I'm like, why do you feel that in this here 2021, you are even entitled to come at me sideways like that? And that too, that it's in any way appropriate or authentic. Like, I find it utterly disgusting when white people do that. I'm sorry, I'm speaking real harshly here, but like, it's disgusting. I guess Black folk are cool.
Well, you know, I'm going to take a page. I'm going to take a page from my pastor and say that we want to extend grace to everybody. And I know I'm going to need some grace. I know I need lots of grace in my life. And I will give that woman who said that to me a couple of weeks ago, and it just has stuck with me. I'm going to give her a little bit of grace on that, because I know she was trying to find a way to connect with me. She doesn't know she missed the mark, and I'm not going to be rude and let her know that. But, you know, I think that is real. And she didn't know she was code switching, but, you know, kudos for her to try and make a connection. So
can I ask you a question, Ms. Juana?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What's the question?
Oh, I thought Lauren was about to add something. I did want to add something else to the code switching.
Oh, no. Please go ahead.
The question I was going to ask you, Juana, was then, you know, when do you let them know then? Like and I fully understand and appreciate giving people grace, but I want to give you an example of something that happened to me at Marshall's pre-COVID, when we could still, you know, go to Marshall's, Home Goods. I love it. But anyway, I was in there with my son, and he was in the aisle, you know, like the where you go to the checkout and they have like the candles, the books, the popcorn, like everything that you could possibly, you don't need, but that you can grab at the front of the store.
Right.
And so the crappy stuff at the front of the store, but he was just so fascinated by the books. And so he's reading a book and, you know, at the time he was 4, so he couldn't read, but he, you know, like was talking about the pictures and saying that this is nice and look at Curious George or whatever. And then this white woman kept saying, you know, your son really likes books. And I was like, yeah, he loves books. And, you know, just kind of left it at that. And then as we were leaving the store, the woman runs behind me and is like, I want to give you this. And she gave me a bag full of books. And I was just like, well, what made you assume that I couldn't purchase my son books? That like my son has books, he has a library of books at home. And that makes me like question myself too, because I'm like, I know she was trying to be nice. I know she was trying to extend, but I also doubt that if I was a white woman, that she would have run behind me out of a store with a bag full of books. I just seriously doubt that.
Yeah. And you're right. That was kind of like the coworker that was giving me the hey girl, hey. She thought that was going to make a connection. I believe that relationships drive results. And when you are in relationship with somebody, you can put them in check. Had that been a good friend of yours, had that been a coworker, and she did that, then you all might have been able to get together and kind of unpack what your reaction was and where that came from. That came from a place that was personal to you. And that lady had no idea. She could have been coming from her own personal place that said, I need to pour into this young man and I need to give back, or I need to make amends. And so, I always try to remember that I'm going to need people to give me a pass. I need people to give me a pass. And so
that's fair.
When people show you exactly who they are, if they're not real, sooner or later that will come out. And if that woman was sincere in time over these last 2 years, she's had an opportunity to do that same kind of thing again with someone else. So,
I can ask a question about the code switching, because I think it's a total black, it's superficial as all get out, but I think it's certainly a conversation for Black women, but it's here at work. So, it's the summertime. So what do we do with our hair during the summertime? Braid it up. We're getting some braids. We're making some protective styles because it's hot, it's sweaty, and I find myself every summer having the same conversation of what kind of braids would be appropriate? How long, how short, which style? How do I explain this? Because I didn't have braids on yesterday. How long do I have to talk about how long I sat for the braids and how painful they are? How long, how often will I have to swat at hands to get out of my hair? How many questions will I have to answer every year when I go and get my locks? So now as we're becoming more creative with Black hair, I find myself seriously every year having a deep conversation in my brain about my hair.
Well, here I sit with a perm, a choice that I've made. And I think I was telling one of my girlfriends a few days ago that when I retire, I am definitely committed to short hair, but when I retire, I'm going to let it go because I want to experience my natural hair. I am so excited to see women embrace the natural texture of their hair and do it proudly and do it boldly, whether it's with locks, whether it's with extensions, whether it's with braids or not. But I think that is a good thing. You said it a few minutes ago, Kimberly, when we were getting started. It's now cool to be ethnic. It's now cool to be Black. It's now cool to have curls. It's now cool to wear your hair in its natural state. So I think you probably are not going to have as many people wanting to touch your locks because they're now going to be trying to figure out how they can replicate what comes natural to you, right? Lauren, what are you saying? You said something.
I'm saying they're going to try to Kim Kardashian themselves and do hand rolls. That's what I'm saying to myself.
Okay.
But
Okay. So let's move on to the next question. I want to make sure I keep us on track. Ebony, did you want to speak to the fourth question about the last time you might have been made to feel that you didn't necessarily belong because of your race?
And you know, and this actually might speak to a whole nother section of colorism and privilege on this other end of the spectrum. Because honestly, so one time my little sister called me one time screaming, and she just in that call, she was in college, I was in med school, I think, but she told me, this is the only thing she said too. She was like, you'll never know what it's like to not get a second look. And I was like, wait, what are you talking? Like, what's going on? Slow down. And she was like, you'll never know what it's like to not get a second look, and it not be or because it's a negative way. And so in that moment, I wanted to kind of go back at her and be like, what do you mean? Like, I'm seeing what you're saying. I'm assuming you're saying because you're Black and I'm Black too. Again, being defensive of like, I'm Black too. But then I had to check myself and say like, no, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. And there's gonna be some light-skinned people that want to come at me and say, what about this? But I don't care what y'all say. There's things that I will never understand as far as being a Black woman that my sisters and my niece have had to go through, that make them recognize. Like I said, the only reason why I recognized that I was Black was because somebody told me I wasn't. You know what I mean? Like, so that even with the hair thing, like I tell Kelly all the time, because Kelly with these curls kind of made me mad. But if I could get an afro going like Dr. Powell, if I could do that, Tyler, I wouldn't like me because of the fact I feel like it is so. And like I tell my little niece, she's 4 years old. Since she could talk, we had her say, "My hair defies gravity." That I mean, Black people, I don't think we know how powerful we are in the fact that gravity is a law. There's only certain laws that exist within this world. And when you pick something up, it's supposed to fall. Your hair doesn't. And that just talks about how strong Black people are, seriously. And your hair grows out of your head in the shape of a crown. And so, you know, to get back on track as far as do I personally feel like I don't belong? I think it's been this privilege of being in a spot where I feel like I belong in every arena. And maybe that's why I don't code switch. Maybe that's why I feel brazen to say whatever I feel like saying. And there's a privilege of saying like, yeah, I'm gonna tell you that you're racist. You already accept me anyway. You let me in the door to be able to even say it. And so, so I don't know if I necessarily have ever felt like I didn't belong. Other than that one time when LS told me I wasn't Black that time. But
I feel so sorry for LS, y'all. We talk about LS at least once a month.
But thing is, I'm grateful for him in one way because it did make me, it gave me a different perspective. You know what I mean? But honestly, I don't think that I haven't for a while now been made to feel that way. If anything, I almost feel like a spectacle, meaning when you walk into a room full of white people, every eye is on you and everybody wants to be engaged. And are you my friend? Or can we, you know, you just feel like you're more so of a pet. Does that make sense?
A trophy.
Yeah.
The trophy. I was going to ask Dr. Powell if she ever feels the same way because you guys kind of look alike.
I was going to second that. I mean, there is light skin privilege is real. And one of my friends, when I was very, very young, one of my really good friends growing up was very, very dark skinned. And I just always thought she was so beautiful. And she's the one who actually said, like, you guys are light skinned. Like, you don't, me and my sister, you're light skinned. Like, you don't know what it's like. And we were like, what do you mean? And she's like, no, there is privilege in being light skinned. And I heard that at a young age. And it wasn't really until I got to college that I truly understood it. I went to school in New Orleans, which is like ground zero for colorism. right? And I would go out, and one of my best friends, who's actually from South Carolina, she's from the Sea Islands, but she's from South Carolina, Charleston area, and we would go out in New Orleans, and she'd be like, none of the guys want to talk to me. I'm like, yes, they do. What do you mean? She's like, no, they all want to talk to you. And I'm like, no, they don't. I'm not even interested in them. I don't even know what they're saying half the time. I don't get their accent. So, you know, but that was true. I mean, in that, I had to start realizing that and understanding that. And now, as I've gotten into my career, I have to agree with you, Ebony. Like, there's times where I'm like, did you hire me because you thought I was disarming to you? You didn't realize how woke I really am, and that I really come for you. Did you think that somehow, because I may not be the darkest, that I may not be as plugged in, perhaps? And on the flip side of that, maybe because I present the way that I do, maybe I can be bolder with how I show up than some of my other friends who may be darker or may have different body politics altogether. It's a whole body politic conversation. And so
Yeah,
I appreciate the authenticity there. Yeah.
I was about to say, I have a friend who uses the term, she walks into a room and doesn't scream Black, but she is probably one of the most woke women that I know. Yeah, she will catch you off guard. As she says, I don't scream Black. She does some professional voice work, and several years ago, she got a request from a client, and they wanted, quote, an ethnic female voice. And my friend took the producer and the customer to school about what that meant. So let's move on. I want to make sure we stay on task and on point. African American women rather exist at the intersections of race and gender, and our LGBTQ sisters exist at the intersection of race, gender, and sexual identity. So I want everybody to answer this. So other than me, you all have to respond so you can start to think about your questions. So Tyler, or answer rather. Tyler, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that communities are only as strong as their most vulnerable members. I think that the intersectionality of race, of sex, of sexual identity is so important because, and I don't believe in measuring struggles, but people are hit from different sides, right? So as a Black woman, we face misogyny. But as, you know, if you're a Black lesbian, you might face misogyny and you might face homophobia. Same with our trans brothers and sisters. I just think it's so important that we lift all of each other up. And again, like, we can't exclude anybody out of the movement. And I do think that there's a tendency within movement for the voice to lend itself to being male. And this is like all movements, you know, not just, you know, civil rights, but I think it's really important that we, as much as we ask people to be our allies, we need to make sure that we are being allies to those who may be equally or even more disenfranchised than we are.
Mm-hmm. So Lauren, you're next.
Yeah, you know, I have to say, like, I think my embracing of the LGBTQ plus community has grown and has evolved over time. I think that I used to hold ideals that are really kind of antiquated, and like, I didn't really understand why I had such views, and this was years ago. And I realized when my best friend actually told me he was afraid to come out to me because he thought like I wouldn't want to be friends with him or anything anymore. And I was like, what? Oh my God, like, no, like, let's talk about this. And you know, I think it's been an evolution, and I was born, raised, and, you know, groomed in the Black church. And I think that there, quite frankly, are lots of contradictory doctrine that's pushed out of the Black church that further marginalize this, especially Black members of the LGBTQ plus community. And I certainly do love the Lord, and I certainly do appreciate everything that the Black church has, you know, created me to be and poured into me. But I have certainly broadened my horizons in doing the work of equity, doing the work of health equity. You cannot harbor biased feelings towards any community, quite frankly, overwhelmingly, and do that work. And so I was really proud that last year at this time, as we're in Pride Month, and so happy Pride Month to those who are tuned in, and to those who may be on this call as well. But last year, Virginia, I'm actually the former director of the Office of Health Equity for the Virginia Department of Health. And so I was responsible for health equity for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, 8.5 million people. And last year, for the first time in history, we did an LGBTQ plus health equity focused symposium. It's all about health in the LGBTQ plus community. And, you know, we had lots of dignitaries come, and it was all about that community. And that was really touching and really groundbreaking for them. We, you know, they led, everything was very community led and organized. And, you know, I have to agree so much with Tyler. I think that, you know, we have to work to ensure that in wanting to move, you know, forward, especially in the stream of Black Lives Mattering, right? We have to remember there are still others within the Black community that are even more marginalized. And we cannot forget that.
Excellent response. Ebony?
Yeah, I think I feel pretty much the same. Growing up, my mom played softball, and literally every Saturday, that was pretty much our childhood, was one of these softball tournaments. And so a lot of her co-players were in relationship with each other. So I think I just grew up seeing that this is completely normal and nothing to even bat an eye about. My nephew is openly gay, very supportive of him and his boyfriend, as long as he stays in check. But it really is one of those things of, I find it's odd to me when people have a problem with who someone else chooses to love. It's like, clearly you don't have enough to do, and or you need to find somebody to love you. Like, if you're not sleeping with him, why you care who he's sleeping with? So anyway, but that being said, I agree. There is a lot of bigotry in the church that I'm hoping we're starting to see a shift away from that. Because if anything, y'all, let's be real, Eve came from Adam, which means that Adam had to be both. I'm just saying, I don't know, that's the way it looks. Right? I mean, how you get a woman out of you then, Adam? Okay, so anyway, but truly, it is one of those things where it never even seemed like a thing to discuss and or talk about. Yeah.
So we are 2 minutes over our time, and I want I want Kelly to go first and answer the question about our relationships with our LGBTQ sisters, and Kimberly, you answer the question, and then you guys can take us home. So Kelly first and Kimberly next.
Sounds good. And honestly, that last question there, I'm going to ask you to ask it because it's really important. So I don't care if we go over the time, but I think that one needs to be asked. I feel like the other panelists have spoken really eloquently about the whole LGBTQ plus space. The only thing that I'll add is I think that we as a Black community have a lot of growing to do and a long way to go in terms of how we treat our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters. I mean, from the very basic of the correct use of pronouns to understanding, you know, what those words LGBTQIA mean, being able to say that with confidence. Just, there's a lot of areas in which that are really simple, that we know that as Black people, we wouldn't be comfortable if people called us out of our name or called us out of who we are, our identity. And so I just think there's a lot that we can do. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm guilty of it. You know, I've stumbled and chuckled and like kind of laughed at the she, he thing and like the theirs, them, like, it's new, you know, it is kind of like learning a new language. There is a lot that I have to learn in that space, but I don't think I can be a responsible citizen if I'm not taking the time to even figure out, well, at just like fundamental base levels, what does this individual refer to themselves as? What do they prefer to be called? And then I'm not going to call them out of their name. Like, that's so That just seems so basic, especially as a people who've been called out of our name for 400 years.
Relationships drive results.
I
So
love that.
Kimberly, you want to take that one? What's the intersection? What does that mean for you?
Yeah. So, well, first things first, my mom plays softball too. So is that just a country mama thing? Because mine did too, even while she was pregnant. Again, I don't think that was the best thing, but
They were playing, we were in the bleachers in that hot
Yeah.
like
in the hot sun all day.
Yeah.
my childhood or your childhood? Whose childhood? Because I didn't have one, right?
I don't know. But, you know, I'm fortunate in that I grew up in sexual health care and in HIV care research and services. And unfortunately, we know the LGBTQIA plus community, they were hit very hard by HIV and still are. And so I was pushed into a culture with customs that I did not know. And it happened at a great time. It happened while I was in college, about to enter graduate school, where I think your brain is really still trying to figure out who you are and your identity and your beliefs outside of your parents or outside of your hometown. And so because of that, I found myself sometimes I call myself a lurker. Sometimes I call myself an ally. Sometimes I call myself an advocate, because I always want to make sure that I don't become so comfortable in another community's culture that I try to appropriate it or I try to represent for it, because it's not my community. But I do enjoy learning about their struggles and their history and their customs and their culture. I can still remember as a graduate assistant, I went with my professor, Dr. Lindley, and she said, I want you to come to Black Pride with me. And I was like, what is Black Pride? Like, what is this? I went, y'all, turned my whole world out. I had never been to anything like this before in my life. I stayed there for 7 hours. They had a ball. It was like an agenda. And they were like, so in the evening, we're going to have a ball. And I was like, oh my God, there will be dancing. This is cute. I don't feel dressed. Because I was expecting like ballroom dancing, debutante pageant. Oh no, honey. It was a full out show. And I was like, these are my people. This is where I belong. Clearly, I am not even all of the woman I should be, because I need lessons here. So it has just been an amazing journey, and I still work in HIV care. So I still get the opportunity to work within the community and use my privilege as a cisgender woman to push their agenda and to funnel not just my voice, but my money and my time and my treasures to make sure that they receive the same level of equity that we're fighting for as a Black community. So it's really been phenomenal. And I almost took it too far. I said I was going to start calling my husband my partner.
I know Trey is not there for that.
I volunteered to be a surrogate.
Listen, I was like, I'm gonna start saying me and my partner went to the movie, so people will have to say, "Oh my God," you know, because no one wants to ask, "Are you gay?" or "Are you know?" or "What are your preferred pronouns?" So I said I was gonna start saying partner.
In that
conversation, what do y'all think?
No,
I am married to a 62-year-old man who absolutely had a stroke when I tried to hyphenate my last name. So no, I can tell you now, that will not work for the Slades.
Probably not gonna work for y'all. Changed my last name, and I've been married for almost 10 years. So he's kind of used to me being a little too aggressive
or rogue.
I changed when we got married. I changed my name, hyphenated it, and he happened to see some paperwork, and he just looked at me and said, "Who is this?" And I had to sleep back human resources and make an adjustment. So I got to have a hyphenated name for about a month.
That's right.
So let's go.
She is me.
Let's go to the sixth one, to the last question, and I'll give it back to our GOODSTOCK sisters. In the speech, Ain't I a Woman, Sojourner Truth stated, "I have heard much about the sexes being equal. I can carry as much as any man and eat as much too, if I can get it. I am as strong as any man I know, and as for the intellect, all I can say is, if a woman have a pint and a man a quart, why can't she have her little pint full? you need not to be afraid to give us our rights for fear that we will take much. What stands out to each of you about this quote? And what does it raise up in you as an African-American woman or Black woman living in the US today? Lauren, you go first.
Can you read like the last part of the quote?
Sure.
The part right after the pints in the court.
Okay. For you need not to be afraid to give us our rights for fear that we will take too much.
That's the part that stands out. That's the part that stands out to me.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, in this moment, which is certainly a Black Lives Matter moment, which is certainly, let me be very explicit, this is an anti-Black racism moment. It's not blanketly just anti-racist. It's a specific type of racism that's anti-Black, to be particular. And within that, there's also the fact that although we know that Black women have been killed by police and are being brutalized and sexually assaulted and harassed and raped, and Black trans women are dying at truly epidemic proportions and have a life expectancy of only the early 30s. That does not move, that has not moved the movement to what we see right now. And to me, that's still intrinsically about the intersectionality and the multiple additional weights of social identity and oppression that come with being both a Black woman that may be a part of the LGBTQ plus community as well. And so the part about being afraid to even extend us, you know, the rights that we're owed because you think will maybe eclipse everything, certainly says a lot to me, especially right now. And it's certainly a part of the work that I do as well, in trying to eradicate gender inequities and gender bias for women working in healthcare. That part speaks volumes to me. I quite frankly think that America is certainly afraid of Black men. I think that they are petrified of Black women.
Yeah. So, Tyler, you go next.
I agree with Lauren. I think that was well said. That the last sentence of the quote is what sticks out to me the most. And I agree. I think, you know, I see it a lot. Like Black people, we sometimes, you know, describe ourselves like we're at war, right? Like we're kind of fighting a war, but then Black women are fighting a war from all sides, because it's not just, you know, the other side, but it's also about, you know, who are we seeing as leaders in these movements? Who are we seeing that we're giving the mic to? And on a separate but still related note, I think Audre Lorde in Sister Outsider, she has an essay entitled "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." And so when I think about this quote, I think about the fact that there are always new achievements to be met, right? It's like, okay, I'm as strong as you. What's next? Okay, I'm as smart as you. I'm as fast as you. And there's always going to be another thing. So I think we as a community, and we as Black women specifically, need to start thinking about ways to work outside the system and dismantle systems that are not built to serve us. And, you know, certain things, systemic inequalities cannot be fixed without widespread systemic change. So I think that's important to keep in mind, because there will always be somebody who's a little stronger than you, so they say you're not strong enough, or et cetera, et cetera. I think it's important for us to set our own standards and expectations for ourselves and our communities.
The bar and the standards keep moving, right?
Yes, they'll always move it.
Yes. Ebony, you go next, and then we're going to turn things over to Kelly and Kimberly. So Ebony, that statement from Sojourner.
Yeah, I mean, she has so many great statements throughout the whole speech. I think one of the things that stood out for me in the speech in total is when she makes the comparisons of saying, like, ain't I a woman, that I have lashes on my back as well. Look at my arms, I'm carrying the load just as well. And one thing that she said in the speech was, I've borne at least 13 children that I've sewed off. And I think that's the piece and the frustration of being a woman, in that there are so many, especially a Black woman, so many lashes on our back that's just not the physical lash. It's the lash of our children and seeing our children die. It's the lash of, of having to be the brave one, the strong one, the soft one. She makes mention of, they say put a coat down on the mud pile, but and help you into the carriage, but I've never had someone do that for me. And so it's this idea of I have to be feminine, but yet at the same time I have to be masculine, and that is extremely tiring. But I do believe that the reason why Black women particularly will save this nation, that's my dog, by the way, but the reason why we will save this nation is because of the fact that we are the birthers of nations. I think Black women have always been the caretakers, and we've been groomed to see things from so many different standpoints, from a manly standpoint, from a woman standpoint. And that same thing that makes us tired sharpens us to be the most well-equipped person to truly handle any and everything that comes our way. So.
Kelly?
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. The other panelists have really hit the nail on the head. The piece that Ebony just mentioned about being tired, I remember telling my therapist that last year. I was like, from the time I was maybe 6, I can distinctly remember my mother telling me, you have to work twice as hard because you're a Black and twice as hard because you're a woman. So from the time I'm 6, I'm like working 4 times as hard, like running on some hamster wheel of achievement and attainment and acceptance, and like just ticking off the boxes, and like that gets old and that gets tiring. And so I think that's the piece that I would underscore, is that Black women for so long have been told that, it's not even about being equal. I mean, it's, yes, we want to achieve equality, but in this quest for equality, we're always pushed to excellence. And, sometimes I just want to be good, hell, sometimes dare I say, can I just be average today? And like, just the notion of it not being okay, just, to be, just to be good enough. I think that's a lot to put on the shoulders of children. And I think that that's something that if every one of our parents has done to us, for better or for worse, just by virtue of the fact that we are Black in America.
And it's crazy, Kelly, you mentioned that. I feel like we're pushed to be excellent, but we're very much forgotten. It's like the Breonna Taylor, we're murdered. We are overstepped, overlooked. Our voices, our names. We have Black women coming up missing, Black girls coming up missing, day in, day out, and it's not talked about. It's not chased after. And even in the other end of the spectrum, as far as achievements, we work our tails off, and we become in these positions, and it's like you're there, but you're not there. And it's that lack of visibility that really disturbs me.
I wanted to piggyback on what Lauren said. She said they don't want to give us too much because they're afraid that we will eclipse them or surpass them. And they should be, because we would. Just because we've been trained and conditioned to do so. I think it just speaks to even why we started GOODSTOCK. I was at work feeling frustrated professionally because I know I do great work. I've moved this department demonstrably and significantly in just 5 years. And yet still you're giving me more assignments, but you're not giving me more pay or promotion. So rather than continuing to beg you for something or to tap dance for you for something, I'm gonna go build my own. And not only am I gonna build my own table, but I'm bringing a bench, because I'm bringing a whole powerhouse of women that are gonna rock your world, that you will need, and you're gonna realize how valuable or what you had is now gone, because no longer am I focused on you. So you should watch.
So let me add, before I give things over to my girlfriends at GOODSTOCK, let me just say, Kimberly, your comments were very inspiring just at that moment. Not that I've not been inspired by all of our conversations tonight, but I recognized about a year or two ago that I had this fear of being bold enough to step outside of the system. And work independently. And I've been really fortunate that I've been in a good environment and have had allies that supported me and invested in my work. But I often wonder if I had been where you were 5 years ago, if I would have been brave enough or bold enough to set out and start out and do my own thing and bring my own bench. So let me say to all of you, I am just immensely proud to have been with all of you this evening. I certainly hope that those folks out there who have listened in on this conversation recognize that there truly is a relationship, and this is a community, and we're glad to have been able to share it with you this evening. So thanks, Kimberly, for allowing me to be here.
Thank you for being our moderator. You know, before we pass this off, I know we're going to wrap up in about 10 minutes, but I'm going to say Miss Juana. Sorry, I can't not say it. Miss Juana, tell us, as young Black women that are walking in the footsteps that you forged, walking along your trail almost to the T, what should we, and knowing your history in the civil rights movement and knowing, I would say, the overt racism that was well before 2020. I mean, we see it now, but tell us, from your history and your legacy, what should we expect moving forward, and how should we temper ourselves in order to manage it?
Well, in full transparency, I have been immensely blessed throughout my life. My father was a United Methodist minister. And if you know anything about the United Methodist Church, we are, since 1972, we have been united with the United Brethren Church, with Methodist, primarily African American Methodist, and Caucasian Methodist. They all came together and created in 1972 what we now call the United Methodist Church. And my father was a respected member. He was a part of that movement in the 70s that brought the churches together. And so I was always in a multiracial environment. And so at 62, I never had the opportunity to be a part of the civil rights movement. I was a child and had an opportunity to watch it happening. I remember my mother and father, one of the most significant arguments that they had was when Martin came to Charleston and my father wanted to march, and my mom was terrified of him going to do that. So I never had the opportunity to actually be in the march myself. I was the product of the struggle. I had the opportunity to benefit from what my parents were doing and from what their friends and family members did do in the struggle that they were in. Where I have always been challenged, as I said to your point a few minutes, Kimberly, being brave enough to step outside of that and take what is mine. And that is, I am an African American female, and I have the rights and privileges there too. And I need to be bold enough and be willing to build my own bench when the chair that I'm given isn't enough. So my sage wisdom to all of you is to be brave and step into that moment. I think that being African American, being Black in this country is a good thing. This is a huge opportunity for us, all people who are on the margins. This is a huge opportunity for us. We need all of you to seize that moment and do something with it. Don't be fearful, be fierce.
You know, that brings up an idea, this whole idea of, I don't need a table because I don't plan on sitting down no way. But with that being said, to those coming in the shadows of the greats, Lauren and Tyler, in this moment when you're seeing these protests of the new civil rights movement of Black Lives Matter, what do you hope is going to be on the other end of this? What does it look like to you? What is it? Yeah. How's it structured? Maybe Lauren, you want to go first?
Well, I hope that we don't pat ourselves on the back with just protests and think that that's enough. I think, there's never a convenient time to work on dismantling racism. There's never a convenient time to protest, right? So the civil rights movement and protesting came with a very different threat, right? It was a threat of dogs. It was a threat of fire hoses. It was the threat of getting beaten. In some of our protests, we have seen some similar threats, but right now the threat is the backdrop of a pandemic that's disproportionately killing Black people. And so there's never going to be the right time to disrupt and dismantle a system. But I certainly hope that while I'm encouraged by the number of people, the sheer diversity and the different types of people that are out protesting, that we don't pat ourselves on the back and say that was good enough. On the other hand, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is amazing. We have had sustained protests for more than 21, 22 days. That's unprecedented right now. And so I think that's extremely amazing. That's very encouraging to me. The other thing is that I hope that corporate America and these hospitals and other systems that have put out these flowery, very beautifully written and articulated statements of how they stand in solidarity with Black lives and suddenly understand the hashtag Black Lives Matter and don't see it as a threat or somehow the new Black Panther Party. I hope that these organizations act on their words and please don't sit behind a beautifully crafted statement to say that that's how you stand with Black lives and that is how you're anti-racist. You have to put action behind that. And I hope that's where this all leads.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that was so well said. And I think, again, got to quote my girl, Audre Lorde. She said that revolution is not a one-time event. And so, it is so important that while we have the momentum, we keep it going, but also take one step at a time. And so for me, in 5 years, I want to see more Black people elected to the House of Representatives. I want to see more Black people, more Black women elected to the Senate. And I want to see, and on a local level, I think it's so important that we get more people who look like us in positions of power, because that's just the only way that we're going to see long-lasting change, instead of, like Lauren was saying, flowery statements and then go back and doing the same thing when nobody's paying attention. I think it's really important that while the spotlight is on, we keep it turned up and we're all paying attention.
And don't get tired, young folks. The bus boycott lasted 381 days. 381. So yeah, we're on day 22. Let's look at the ones that came before us and say, how did you keep it up? What made you keep on walking, even though your legs are tired in this winter time? What made you keep going? And we need to find that why within us that says, this is why I'm doing it, and this is why I won't get tired. And protest in whatever way that looks for you. You don't have to be out in the streets. You can be protesting by foreign policy. You can be protesting by making calls and trying to get people elected, even if you don't want to be in that position. Do what you have to do. Mm-hmm. But we won't finish until the job is done. So,
and I want to ditto Ebony's comment. I think what we have got to do is to hold our systems accountable. Lauren, my organization issued flowery statements, and my CEO's statement went out before anybody else's in the state of South Carolina, which is huge. If you know the history of South Carolina, that was huge for him and huge for us to do that. But he's putting actions behind the flowery words. That's what we got to do. He's an ally, and I recognize the fact that he is, and I value that because there's truth and power in his words. Thanks, ladies. Back to you.
Well, I'll tell y'all, this has been fantastic. It's always good to me to learn from those who come before us and then see generations that are coming afterwards, Tyler, and hoping that what we are doing is setting a good example. But honestly, I think my closing statements will be to the young Tylers in that I'm incredibly proud of who y'all are anyway. There's things that my generation, we won't be able to teach you guys. Just like you said, your generation has had to grow up and see things that no child should have to see. Columbine happened when I was in high school. And I remember thinking when we heard that over the intercom of like, wait, what do you mean? Because we didn't have social media. There was no Facebook, right? So I can't imagine the trauma that you guys have lived through. And it's the same trauma that our parents had to live through with the civil rights movement and having to see literally bodies lynched and people hanging in trees and people having picnics to celebrate that as a dangling body is there. So I don't understand, honestly, how that feels. So I say to you guys, talk to us. Let us be your sounding board. If you feel like you need to one day, if you feel like I can't go out because there's so many people here and I am having a moment where I feel like I am freaking out, literally call us because we want you to have that outlet because we need you. The generation that comes before is always better than the generation that left. I do feel like that. You're smarter than us, you're more talented than us, and we need to do a better job of protecting you guys. And it's my generation's, I think it really is our responsibility because we don't have that trauma on either side of us to be the most vocal. So we need to get our shoes dirty. We need to get our hands busy. We're now in the age that we can be in positions of leadership and power. So we need to make ourselves uncomfortable and say, I'm going to run for that political seat, even if I don't want to be necessarily political. Then be on the student council, be on the PTA board, be on something. But we need to do a better job of protecting the ones that are coming behind us. And so, so yes, I just thank you all for everything y'all taught me today.
And that was so sweet. I actually wrote down pretty much sort of kind of the same thing. I wanted to thank Miss Juana for walking before us and creating a path that even gave us an opportunity for a good stock. You know, you started this before DEI was even a thing. When you had to convince white folk that they need to hear from Black people, Black and brown people, and we need and value them in their systems because they make their systems work, you know? So, and I know that was a heavy lift because it's still heavy today. So I sincerely thank you for creating opportunities for Black girls like us. Lauren, I thank you for walking beside us. I've seen you in action, and Hunty, if you ain't ready, you better get ready. Kelly can tell you, once I am in love with you professionally, I don't let go. So whether you want to like me or not, you will. So we're friends, okay? So just accept it. Whether you want to be friends or not, we gonna be friends. So I mean, it is what it is because I admire you, and I never have a problem telling another woman, especially a Black woman, like, girl, you are the it. And I want to be just like you. So thank you so much for standing in your truth on every call and every meeting. And Tyler, I want to thank you for walking behind us, for everything that Eb said. You are the truth. You will be the light. We will get tired, but you guys have a sense of energy and urgency that is so contagious. Me think, well, damn, I got to get my shit together. Excuse me, Miss Juana. But yes, but I appreciate the fervor, and we're going to need it because for everything you said, Tyler, a revolution is not a one-time event. So thank you for letting us know that you're committed to that fight, and just thank you guys for tonight.
Absolutely. I echo my colleagues, Kim and Eb's comments to the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And thanks to the folks who tuned in on YouTube for sitting in and learning with us. You know, you can learn more about GOODSTOCK at www.goodstockconsulting.com. We also encourage you to check out our previous Breaking Bread panels. You know, we've heard from white women, we've heard from Black men, we've heard from women of color about how COVID-19 is impacting their communities, you know, the Native community, the Latinx community. So there's lots of different things that we have been unpacking and discussing in these panels. And so we hope you'll keep tuning in. We're hosting these on a monthly basis. So there'll be one coming up in July and another one in August. For the folks who know me out there, y'all know I love me a good quote. And Tyler, in light of your newfound love and appreciation of Audre Lorde, I'm gonna close us out with one of her quotes that is another one of my favorites. And that is, caring for myself is not self-indulgent. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. And I'm gonna repeat that. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. And so what I'll say as we wrap up is that during this incredibly tumultuous time in which we find ourselves at the intersections of a global pandemic and an unprecedented civic uprising and activism to help address this racial injustice and the fight for equity in Black lives around this nation, please remember to take care of yourselves, everybody. That means, drink your water, get adequate sleep. Please turn off the news, take a bath if that's your happy place. Just take care of you. So with that, I'll just close this out by saying, please stay safe, be encouraged, and stay tuned what's coming up next from GOODSTOCK Consulting. Have a good night, everybody.